I think when someone is let go, it's generally because they've done something stupid, just really stupid, and not just once or twice, but it seems to be a personality trait that just doesn't want to participate. And we have a lot of rules, and people make mistakes all the time, and I'm fine with mistakes. I think if you don't make a mistake, you're not getting outside your box. So mistakes are fine, but if you do have a mistake, call it, claim it, and let people know, shoot, I just did this. How can we fix it really quick?
Welcome to Between the Briefs, a podcast by Steno. We're here to bring you practical tips, expert insights, and real conversations about the pretrial process, court reporting, and the legal technology shaping the future of litigation. I'm your host, Adrian.
And I'm your host, Joe Stevens. Whether you're an attorney, paralegal, or just curious about how technology is changing the legal industry, we've got something for you. Each episode will break down complex topics, share behind-the-scenes intel, and talk to the people leading innovation in and out of the courtroom. So grab a coffee and let's get into what's happening between the briefs.
Welcome to Between the Briefs, your go-to podcast for legal innovation. I'm Joe Stevens.
And I'm Adrian. Today, we're excited to be joined by Karen Mesmer, Legal Services Manager at Shook, Hardy & Bacon, one of the nation's premier litigation firms. Karen has spent over 2 decades at this firm. She started off as a paralegal, and now she spearheads technology and operations strategy for one of the most sophisticated legal environments in the country.
Karen's experience offers a fascinating perspective on how large firms are adapting to the rise of AI, how decisions about legal tech are being made, and how traditional workflows are meeting innovation head-on. Karen, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here with us today. How are you?
Really good. Thank you.
Well, it's such a joy. Adrian and I've been doing this now for, this is what, the second season, Adrian?
Yes.
Karen, when it came up, we're thinking about other guests, you were just such a perfect addition to this because of the role that you play. Can you just introduce yourself to everyone and sort of say what your current role is?
Okay. So I'm a legal services manager at Shook. And really what that entails is I keep an eye out. First of all, I have a lot to do with hiring and firing people. Not a lot of firing, which is good. That would be incredibly sad. But I also look and speak to vendors a lot. I would say maybe 12 years ago, I started seeing stuff out in the, in the legal field that was making our job a little easier instead of us doing everything from scratch. And so from there, I just kind of got the bug. And today I just love new things. It's like toys.
I love that. So you mentioned that you got the bug, you see things develop. How has your career really changed from the beginnings, the very beginnings? Because, we introduced you as you first began as the paralegal.
Yeah.
How has that role for you developed, and how did it actually begin in the first place?
Okay. So got to go way, way, way back in time. And seriously, I want to say 43, 44 years ago. So I started being a paralegal. I went to a school here in Kansas City, and then I moved out to New Mexico and just started being a paralegal. Back then, there were no computers. There were typewriters. I think the big thing that came very soon was that kind of typewriter that would save stuff for just a little bit of time. I can't even remember what it was called, but it was kind of cool. And so everything was done just on the ground. And back then I worked I started a business called Outside Legal Support, and I worked for both plaintiff firms and defense firms. And I found that lawyers, at least during that time, were procrastinators. And so as such, they weren't getting ready for trial. So they kind of hoped that the matter might get resolved. And that's, like I said, on both sides. So about 2 months out, when it was obvious that shoot, we're going to trial, I would get involved and start interviewing witnesses and preparing, the trial notebook and do the jury instructions, and then we'd be done.
Do you see, so that's evolved now, right? I'm really interested in this because I teach at a law school too, on top of, doing this with Adrian and working at Steno. And I've noticed even in the last 18 months, like a shift in skill set. So what you're talking about is really like the nuts and bolts of what trial law was for
Yeah.
so long. And now that just feels kind of, I mean, people still do that, but I feel like there's so many different ways to enhance that or that process has been changed. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, totally. I think back then it was maybe much easier in a lot of ways because we're not talking about, tons of people. Then again, the cases that we're talking about, 40 some odd years ago versus the ones that I work on now, like, it's one plaintiff, one defendant. Maybe it's a motor vehicle accident or malpractice. Now, you're talking about mass tort, and so it's a production. It's like putting on a play.
I would love to touch on the changes you're seeing, kind of like the adjustment periods, rather. You mentioned developments of like the new typewriters and how that technology kind of revolutionized because you had the ability to save memory.
Right.
And then now we're seeing a whole new advent where it's AI automations. What had those transitions looked like from when you first started your career to now? Do you find that they're getting easier to adapt to or harder?
Well, I think with anything, fear kind of can play into it. So if you're scared of change, if you're scared of, and I mean scared of maybe making a mistake with it, not scared of physically doing it. So if you're scared that something might go wrong, um, I think that can be intimidating. It's generally not bad for me, but I do know that there's a lot of people that how do I use this? Is it good? Is it, is it going to miss the boat? I mean, there's a lot of concern that some people have. Kind of going to Steno when I started helping these attorneys get ready for trial, I would summarize a deposition the old-fashioned way, and I would actually highlight it with a highlighter. I'd give it to someone who was my typist, and she would type it, and so I basically had a formula that if it was, an 80-page depo, you shouldn't have it should be 8-page summary in essence. And what I did like about doing it manually, at least back then, was I think a witness, you can often read what they're not saying, if that makes sense. And I don't know if AI can even capture that yet. And sometimes it's a matter of the uhs that they say, um, or they don't necessarily answer the question given. And for me, as I'm reading it, I'm going, "What is wrong with them?" And so that I don't know is fixed yet. I don't know if AI can take that on. Can it?
Well, I mean, I think you're touching on something really brilliant. I mean, I have in my house, I have a wall of books because I don't think that there is anything that replaces like this act of sitting down with a book and
Yeah,
reading it, right?
I
There's
love that
something
too.
there that's tactile, that matters, and that nothing will ever replace. So you're talking about that on one level, and then the other side is sort of like the efficiency thing.
Mhm.
Summarizing a transcript is, I mean, at its core, like spending time going through and taking 10% of a transcript and sort of reducing it to that.
Yeah.
So I guess if I can get you to address both sides, like what are since we're talking about AI this soon,
Okay.
what are the things that you look at and you're like, okay, this is amazing, this functionality, I wish I'd had it 40 years ago. And then what are the things that you see now and you're like, this is tragic, or I hate that this exists.
I don't think anything's tragic because yeah, because I do believe that let me just go back a little more in time. So obviously computers came along, right, during my, tenure. And then eventually, like maybe 15 years ago, um, I was talking to a client who was very frustrated. We had a huge litigation, and she wanted a database built so that she would know exactly what is in there. And I asked around, no one really had a good one to show. And so eventually we finally figured out how to do it. What was a blast about it was even the vendor that I went to wasn't quite thinking about automating things. So as an example, this particular client, they had a warning system where there were like 7 different pieces of documentation that the patient would see. And and in turn, but it was all based upon when they went into the doctor the first time. So we actually trained the database that once you put in the first date that the person went in to see the doctor for this particular product, poof, came all of the warning labels and materials that that patient received. And so what was good about that was when the depot was then taken, you're not running around going, "Where's the label? Where's the this? Where's the that?" It was all there. So it made it really, really convenient. So back to anything being scary by any means, it's not. I just think you constantly have to evolve with how can you take this piece and then make it do more. And I think you guys do that.
Love that. And that's a great point. When it comes to, you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation how you are involved with hiring and also firing. Want to dig into that a little bit more.
Okay.
What do you look for when it comes to hiring, right? And then what metrics help you determine, I think it may be time for firing? Because that's
Yeah.
a tougher conversation. So I would
Right.
love to see both sides of the spectrum here.
Okay. So hiring's pretty nice. You often, especially these days, it seems like I will review a lot of resumes. And you know, from a bachelor to a doctorate, these people will want to get into a law firm. Um, their education is important, but their writing is super important. So if they send a resume and there's a typo or a tense, especially, with the way Word can clean up your document, that's a problem because they're not paying attention. And why aren't they paying attention on the one thing that introduces themselves? So if I see that, I'm not crazy about that person. Now that doesn't disqualify them, but it makes me think, what were you doing that day, And then what were you doing the next day when you reviewed it? So, but nonetheless, so their education is important. Their experience is also very important. I really like to find people that have been in this field. Um, and sometimes people just want to um, get into the door so that they can, do whatever they're going to do. Um, but most importantly, it's their energy. So when I get on a call with someone and, they're just answering the questions and being just really, eh, are they gonna be that way at work? And because we're partially, we're hybrid, and so we're remote some days and we're in the office other days, what are they gonna be like when they're remote? Are they just gonna sit around? So, I mean, all those things are kind of important that I look at. I wanna know. I don't test them, I'll tell you that. I don't test anyone like, what would you do if, something happened? And, but I do watch how they answer things, and I see if they kinda take off a little, if they try and not control the conversation, but at least contribute to the conversation. I was interviewing one person, and she kept looking at her phone, and I thought, "That's stupid," you know? "You've lost me. You've really lost me." And then another person was asking about other divisions within Shook. So it was like, "Wow, you really don't want this job. You just want your door. You wanna get your foot in the door." So those are kind of the things I look at. Firing, I'm pretty forgiving. Um I think when someone is let go, it's generally because they've done something stupid, just really stupid, and not just once, or twice, but it seems to be a personality trait that just doesn't want to um, participate the way I think you need to participate. And we have a lot of rules, and people make mistakes all the time, and I'm fine with mistakes. I think if you don't make a mistake, you're not getting outside your box. So mistakes are fine, but if you do have a mistake, call it, claim it, and let people know, shoot, I just did this. How can we fix it really quick? And when they own it, that's a good employee. When they put it underneath the table, they're not so good.
Karen, on this point, well, like, what's a soft skill that someone has that's really hard to quantify on paper? I mean, you talked about energy, for example.
Mhm.
Like, I find as I kind of continue to grow in my career too, that things like kindness or like
Mm.
humility or things that are
Mhm.
just really sound so basic, but they matter so much. Do you feel the same way? Is there anything that
Yeah.
stands out to you as something significant?
Yeah, manners is another good one. I think please and thank you go a long way. Um, I sometimes have to, do backspace, and put in the word please because I'm shooting something off really fast. But I think those are important. I do think someone who cares about the firm and cares about the people that are on their team is really important. I don't like mean girls. I don't like, cliques. Um, I understand how people will congregate if they're similar, if they have similar interests. But if anybody's mean, that is my trigger. And I don't like bullies.
Is it getting harder to identify those things in a digital age? Because I see, lots of law
Yeah,
firms are going more remote, uh,
right.
for whatever reasons, it's cost savings or just like accessibility to talent. Yeah, are those key points that you just mentioned harder to identify in those remote environments?
Yes, because anybody really, I mean, it's kind of like a relationship, right? That you're in. Anybody can be good for 3 months, right? And then their personality starts to come out. It's very similar in a law firm, such that when you interview them, oftentimes now I am doing it online. I'm talking to people that way, and I'm only seeing 30 minutes of their entire existence. And if you can't be great for 30 minutes, that's pretty scary. So that person could come to the firm, and I haven't had this, but could come to the firm and just be a dog, just just not bring it. So I
All
agree.
right, Karen. So we talked about AI a little bit. Now we
Okay.
talked about sort of like not head count necessarily, like footprints, skill sets within a staffing an office the size of Shook. Let's bring those two together. So if I
Okay.
put you on the spot and I said AI is going to be taking jobs outside of law, or it's going to restructure the way law firms currently are staffed, like how do you react to this conversation?
Unless it's I don't see it yet. I mean, I'm open to someone kind of convincing me the other way, but the way I see it is that it's much like a computer is to me, 20 years ago or whenever it was that I got my first little computer. The point is that it enhanced my work. It didn't make me someone that, I mean, obviously a computer's not going to do the work. I don't think AI is going to completely do the work. What AI is going to give is you're going to ask the questions that you need the answers to. And so instead of spending a day going through 1,000 pieces of literature or records or whatever, you don't do that anymore. You get to the questions. Now, still with that said, because of who I am, I would still skim because there's, like I said when we were talking about depots, it's the part where they don't talk about something. So as an example, let's just say it's medical records and AI gets involved. Um, they might tell me all sorts of stuff, by dates and the doctor and what the thing was. But if you go one week and give a certain list of stuff, and then you go another week and you completely leave out something, that leaving out of that something is actually more important to me because that might be an alt cause. So can
Great
you do
point.
that with AI? I don't know.
So I'm curious, how else are you using AI as a legal services manager? Are you using it aside from hiring? Because it sounds like you do use it to like analyze experience, resumes. What other utilizations do you have for it?
Well, I'm a baby with AI. I mean, what seriously, I mean, the firm is this firm is all about making us smarter, with the way we work. And so we will look at different vendors for different reasons. And as you all know, Steno came to Shook and actually two different locations and gave presentations. Um, with that, have I ever taken a depo and created a summary for myself? No. Should I? Absolutely, because I need to play with it, because if I don't play with it, I'm not going to feel comfortable around it, and I'm not going to feel comfortable around those that are using it, and to make sure that they've asked the right question, if that's, you know, to the platform.
So even if like the internals, we had a COO on, Adrian. I forget what her name was now. She was out of Florida, and she was a COO of a sort of multi-office firm, and she was pretty adamant. She was sort of like, the headcount is not going to change within law firms, but the skill set in those seats is going to sort of shift in priority and shift in focus. Does that feel more right to you? I mean, are you interviewing people now, or, where you're actually prioritizing or curious about their use and fluency of things like AI, different products that are out there that you might not even know about?
Yeah, I mean, and I guess it's the negative of that. So if they don't, let's say they like Word. If they work in Word for anything, I mean, that's horrible, because it's just it's just a bunch of words, and you can't do much with it, because a lot of what we do is a lot of dicing of that information. So if I've got someone who, even Excel, if they come on and, I'll say, "So how are you, in Excel?" "Well, I'm not bad." "Well, how are you in Excel?" And if they can't do Excel, which I think everyone should know how to do Excel, um, then they're not gonna use any other, platform or device that we have. They're just not. They're gonna wanna do it always, quote, "the old-fashioned way."
Mm.
So,
Now, you've had a very, I would say, very successful career, right? Seeing as how
I've
you're
liked
from
it.
your beginnings
Yep.
to now, what do you think is a secret to
Huh.
continuously leveling up in a firm and just aspiring to achieve new positions and getting those positions?
Well, I think being a good teammate is really important. I think if you come in and you push your way around and you kind of try and take over, and I am pushy. I do know that about myself, but if that's the way you act within a team, that can backfire. And you also have to like change. I mean, there are some people that have probably never moved the furniture around in their house. And and if they haven't, and they're not gonna necessarily change in this environment, and this especially since COVID. This environment has really changed a bunch, and I've liked everything that has changed. I mean, just doing depots remotely is such a wonderful thing. Trying to get an attorney, across the country for a 4-hour depot, only to then have to fly him back, the next. I mean, it's stupid. So, and I get that there are certain witnesses that you want to be in the same room with, experts especially, but when it comes to a lot of fact witnesses, no. So, I like change. I want them to like change. With me, I came into Shook with, being an independent contractor, and so I had constant change. I had constant, different clients that I was working with. When I came here, I started out as this little paralegal, and within a very short period of time, I didn't want to be in that box. I wanted to, you know, I had a mind, I had ideas, I had thoughts. I read something and I didn't think it made quite, the right sense. So, I think when you do that in a law firm, you do really well. I think you also wanna do things outside of just your job. And so sometimes that's putting on an event because the Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl again, and we have. And so, not this year necessarily, but little things like that, helping out when someone retires, when one of the partners retires. It's a lot of fun to put on, events for them that are creative and meaningful to them, where they get all teary-eyed. So, that sort of stuff.
Karen, is there anything that you learned in your paralegal days that you still sort of bring with you into your current job?
Um, yeah, I would think, I think probably being present. So, I have never been someone who, shows up does the same thing leaves. I mean, I just don't. And I think that's really important. I'm also protective of my boundaries. Um, I've made many a person feel bad about asking me for something at 8 o'clock at night, but I do it in a very nice, graceful sort of way.
I mean, the lawyer in me now wants to kind of stay in
Okay.
this space because I'm kind of I think it combines a couple of things, right? Like I used to work in restaurants, and still think that lessons that I take from late nights at restaurants I think I learned more in a way in those restaurants than I did in some classes, some fundamental core classes in law school. And those things stick with me. And you're talking about something we were talking about soft skills earlier, like
Mhm,
kindness and
mhm.
not being mean. I mean, being present falls into that category as well. And people use that all the time to mean so many different things, but there's so many elements of like kindness and thoughtfulness, and you're sharing your time deliberately with someone, and that's an act of kindness. And then when you boundary that off, there's also a
Yeah,
kindness to the boundary side of things too. It's fascinating to me that it seems like a lot of that took place in your early years as a paralegal.
yeah, it did. And probably even before that, because, I was talking to, a company that we hope to get business from, and there were 2 things I was raised with. One, I had a mother who was, a special ed teacher, and so she was a great teacher. And then the other part was my father was a man who owned a bunch of dental supply companies, so he was in essence a salesman. And so the salesman person in me is the customer is always right, which means our clients, even if they're not right, they're right. You know, you just, you got to know that because that's the way you need to treat them. And then the teacher in me, I love to teach. I mean, I love to find people that want to learn how to do something new. Um, I I think with everything that we do at a law firm, especially even with AI and other, tricks that we have, different platforms and such, still can be overwhelming. It can still seem too much for some personalities. And so for those folks, it's really good to step back with them and find out kind of how they're keeping the balls in the air, and maybe they're doing a little piece there and a little piece there and a little piece there and not finishing anything. That's overwhelming to that person, and it would be overwhelming to me too. So little things like that I like to look for.
Now, Karen, in your role, are you also in charge of professional development? Seeing as how you would do the firing side, I'm assuming maybe the professional development side are one on one.
Well, tell me what you mean by professional development.
So, if an attorney says, I do aspire to be a senior associate, right?
Right.
Are you there to say, hey, okay, well, if that's what you're looking to achieve, here is like some goals that we're gonna have to lay out, or things that we want to see checked off in the firm
Right.
to achieve that role.
So I wouldn't do that with an attorney, although I think I've, through all these years, have raised them a little. Because seriously, they go through law school, they're done with law school, they know nothing about the practice of law. I mean, why they don't spend at least a half a year doing that instead of, moot court, which is important too, but nonetheless, it's tough on them. And so helping them raise them is fun because they get really, really excited about what they're working on, and then if they're excited about their work, then their work's usually gonna be great. In my world, so I might bring a paralegal in. I want that paralegal to grow with the firm as well. So I want that person to eventually, if they can, turn into a senior analyst. If they're even better, they turn into a project assistant, or excuse me, a project manager, which is great. I was one of those for a while, and then of course they can have my. But I mean, serious. I think growth is really important for keeping people vested and excited about the day that they're starting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this idea of like progress and becoming a fuller version of yourself professionally, I
Yeah.
think is truly inspirational. Um, okay, Karen, here's what I'm interested in too.
Yeah.
I am so when I pick up the phone and or someone's trying to sell me something,
Okay.
I work at law school outside of Steno, and people are always trying to do that. How do you not get fatigued by that side of
Hmm.
your job? Especially now when I feel like every single person has a different thing that they're trying to tell you is going to make your life better.
Yeah. So funny that you brought that up. I just got a cold call yesterday. And I, if I'm not in the mood, and I wasn't in the mood yesterday to talk about whatever they were selling, I just let them know that I might be in the mood in 2 months. So back off for now if you're really interested in showing your wares. Otherwise, I'm gonna not want to talk to you ever. Um, I think court reporting is a good example. It can be you can have a lot of people pushing to get into the door, and that can be hard. Um, not 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 just for them, because I know they need to do that. That's how they expand their business, and their clientele. But sometimes on our side, we're just trying to get through the next filing or the next trial or the next exhibit list, whatever we're working on. So sometimes it's like, wow, I really appreciate what y'all are trying to do, but chill, just a smidge chill. So
Makes sense. And do you
yeah.
have a kind of checklist or nice to haves whenever you're evaluating a software or someone comes to you with a solution?
Well, number one, we've got a whole department that also does that. And they've looked at everything. They're super smart people, scary smart people. And so when I see something new, I will often let them know as well so that they can so that they can participate. I hit something. And but but as far as I look at cost. Cost is important to me because I really kind of goes back to the salesman, being raised by my dad. I can't spend their money. I can't spend a client's money if I don't think they're getting a really fair exchange, because it just bothers me. Hidden costs really make me crazy, because they don't know, so they're trusting us to know what we're doing and who we're hiring. So I like vendors to be on the surface, to tell us what they've got.
Karen, when you sort of reflect on your career and you think about, are you one of these people that's like, I'm going to be doing this job for the rest of my life? Or do you want to get this to a spot where you're like, well, now it's time for me to sort of move on to another phase of my profession or my life, right? Like
Yeah,
leaving this
yeah,
behind. How will that be
yeah.
hard for you? And how do you even think about that?
I don't think it'll be hard. I mean, recently, so if I go back 15 years ago, I would have said, had I won the lottery, I would have still stayed here. I would have still done my job. I love it that much, and I still love it that much. But now that I'm of age where I can, you know, leave and quote, use that big word, retire. Um, I guess the way I look at it is I have a plan. I know when I'm doing it. If it gets moved a little, that's cool. But I do want people to be ready to take my place because the one thing about Shook that I think is just amazing is nobody leaves. I mean, I've been here, what, 27 years. That's nothing. I mean, there's people that have been here 40, 45 years. And I just and it's because it's such a good firm. People really care about each other. And I do think because, the environment of how we do things is changing, so that's fun, that's exciting. But also litigations are changing as well, so that's fun. So, yeah, I want someone to take my place. But if I don't pick them, that's cool too. I'm sure Shook will find someone great.
I've got 2 points on that. So the first one is,
Okay.
what do you think Shook did to cultivate that kind of culture to maintain people for so long? Because I feel like right now, especially in the digital age,
Mhm.
everyone is looking for short-term bursts of success, layoffs happen, and then they just kind of keep that model turn.
Yeah. So this is nice about Shook. when we're a trial firm. We do a lot of trials. And when COVID happened, that took a nice chunk of business, stopped it. And I can't remember if it was 6 months before we ever went back into the courtroom, or maybe even longer. Maybe it was a year, but no one got laid off. They made it work. Now, the negative of COVID is you get really used to being at home in your sweats. I remember thinking this little camera on my computer, people could see me 24/7. So I put little stickums up there so they couldn't. Of course, that wasn't but I think, I think Shook. I don't know. I don't know what it is, because it's not like we have lots of parties. There is, you have those days that are, staff appreciation or whatever, but it's just I swear it's just a kindness that I see. And another thing is you'll see people who, all of a sudden someone's got an emergency, and so we'll send out some emails for help. Tons of people say, "I'll help." And it's not because they're getting anything out of it. It's because they want to help. So I think when you hire people like that, and I don't know how they did it, but when they hire people like that care not only about the firm and the business, but they care about each other, and they don't want someone working a 24-hour just to get something out the door, because it's not going to be done well that way. That's important. So what was the second part of your question?
Well,
You
the
have one
second
part?
part of my
Okay.
question was, you mentioned, you might have to find a replacement, or Shook will find that
Mm.
replacement. How do you go about finding that type of person? Like, how do you know this person is set for being a good legal services manager?
I think when you see them kind of also rise, in the different positions, that kind of indicates that. It shows you that they're interested in taking on more responsibility. Um, I mean, they're just around me. There's several people that I could walk out and say, "Hey, you want my job?" And I don't know if they'll say yes, but you know, there are people that would be qualified for sure.
Adrian, I think it might be time for our hot take question. What do you think?
Definitely. Definitely.
All right, Karen. So
Okay.
we do this at the end of every episode, and it's always leads to a really interesting sort of way to end things. But what is your hottest take on the industry right now?
This really is this is strange. Okay. So are you familiar with affirmation projects, that law firms do? So people want to change their name. And they want to change their name because they are going from a female to a male, or a male to a female, whatever that is. I have a real pet peeve with kids going through that process. And that's because I've never met a teenager that knew what they wanted in 10 years, ever. And so but I also understand parents. I understand parents are very, scared of what might happen to their child if they don't, um, go through that process. It just worries me, because I also think kids are stupid, a little stupid. And I mean, not stupid, but dumb at doing stuff. And then I also think that they all want attention. And, that's such an age of, whether they want attention in the home or they want attention at school or whatever it is. It's like, let's try and direct them a little more into maybe the things I did growing up. So I don't know. That worries me about kids. Don't do
That's
anything
fair.
to them that they can't change.
That's fair. A big hot take. Thank you for sharing that, Karen. Seriously. And that is a perfect wrap for today's episode of Between the Briefs. A big thank you to Karen Mesmer for joining us and sharing her insights on the evolution of legal operations, decision making in the age of AI, and how large law firms like Shook, Hardy, and Bacon are adapting to the future of legal work.
Be sure to subscribe, everyone, so you don't miss future episodes. And thanks for listening. Until next time.
Thank you, Karen. Up next on Between the Briefs.
I would say the most common gap is to be able to execute change, to get adoption of whatever that change is. Maybe it's a workflow, maybe it's a taking advantage of new technologies. Whatever that change is, firms struggle to get everybody going in the same direction and to get that adoption, because adoption only happens when the majority of people within that organization choose to change. And it is a choice, right? So changing minds and hearts can be really a complicated thing for so many reasons, but people don't like change overall.
Stay tuned for the full interview coming to you soon. Between the Briefs is brought to you by Steno. To find out more about Steno and how we combine exceptional court reporting and litigation support services to deliver a superior litigation experience, visit steno.com. That's STENO.com. And then make sure to search for Between the Briefs in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts, and click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Steno, thanks for listening.